Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. We want to let you know that we have once again been honored with a nomination for the Hockey Podcast of the Year via the Sports Podcasting Awards. And all you need to do to help us is go to ourkidsplayhockey.com and click on the Vote Now button. It asks you a couple questions. You're in and you're out, and you have voted for us for Hockey Podcast of the Year. I want to thank you all for being a wonderful, wonderful audience and helping us get to this stature of hockey podcasting, because we've done it as a family, as the hockey friends and families around the world. Thanks so much and enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Lee with Our Kids Play Hockey. Really great episode today, as always. We have Wendy Glover on. She founded Athleadership, which helps young people, coaches, teens, parents, everyone involved in that young development space find a better way to help develop their kids. And it was a really great discussion. We dive really deep into kind of what makes younger people tick and how we as parents and coaches can get better for them as leaders, to create future leaders, to create more accountable people, to give them the skills needed for life, beyond just hockey. So if that's something you're interested in, which you listen to the show, you probably are. Great episode. Wendy was a great guest. A lot of information here that you can take away. Also, right before the holidays, remember, check out whenhockeystops.com to check out the children's book that Christy and I wrote. It's great for anybody from about 6 to 12 years old. It's 65 pages with some photos or illustrations, I should say. It's available now for pre-sale, again, at whenhockeystops.com. You get some cool gifts if you pick it up before publication date. But as always, enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey and have a wonderful day. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friends Christy Casciano-Burns and Mike Benelli, and we are joined today by Wendy Glover, the founder of Athleadership, which strives to help teens and those involved in youth sports, that includes parents, coaches, and mentors, to develop in a more appropriate way. We'll get into that in a moment. Wendy is a holistic athlete development practitioner and academic and personal development advisor for athletes, and she has a ton of experience, over 17 years spent in the educational environment, which is complemented by her degrees in kinesiology, human development, and K through 12 HPE. We don't just bring anybody on the show. We bring valued experts. Wendy, can't wait to dive into this with you today. Welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Thanks for having me, Lee, Mike, and Christy. I'm super glad to be here and hopefully spreading a good message of leadership through hockey out to the community. I think it's a great message to share.
Oh, I think so too. I think we've done, I don't know how many episodes now, guys. We're in probably the high 60s, but that's what we're all about. So when Mike Benelli said we have to have this person on the show, I'm hitting my desk for effect. It's working. But we have a lot of great questions. So we're going to dive right into it today, Wendy. You know, one of the things we talk about a lot on the show, and not just this show, but just life in general, is that there seems to be this inconsistent message right now that everything is black and white. It's right or wrong. It's left or right. And in truth, there's so much gray area. Most things have gray area. There are very, very few things in life, very few, that are right and wrong. And when we get into this with sports and what you do, and this is coming from Mike and me, this is a tweet I saw. You said you're either coachable or not. I mean, you didn't say this. This is what we're going to talk about. Coachable or not. You're mentally tough or you're not. You're a team player or you're not. Can you discuss your thoughts on that mentality? And maybe we'll break it down a little bit of how we should start to approach this a little differently moving into 2022.
I think you nailed it with the gray area piece. And so often we'll speak in hockey, obviously other sports as well, as, like you said, you're this or that, or this or that. And I hear it often from people involved in sport. And when you work, especially with teenagers, as they're changing so dramatically over many years, is you really need to know the gray area. And in that gray area is where I like to live. So it depends on, like, I like the word "it depends," which goes around in circles as well. Is this player in front of you or this person in front of you, the gray area needs to be explored because they're maybe not as coachable in this situation because of this, or this. Sometimes it's their perception of a situation. Like, for every single person, every situation, those specific things, good teammate, bad teammate. Well, why are these behaviors showing? Like, let's get to the root of, are these healthy behaviors? Why are you behaving this way? kind of dig into the gray area, because as you mentioned, you're not this or that. Nobody wants to be labeled. Humans develop all the time and change, and we kind of need to look at them more in a way of open-ended rather than labeling them as these areas of this or that.
Especially as a teenager. I always like to bring that up because I find a lot of coaches do surface coaching. Okay. And believe it or not, there's a time that's right for that and time that's wrong. Like, coaches are not babysitters. I always say that's an important distinction for parents. Like, you're not just dropping your kids off to be babysit, and coaches can only do so much when they have 20 players on the team. Right. But when you go beyond the surface coaching, and it might not always be the head coach that does this, sometimes they need to bring in people like you, Wendy, or bring in other people. You dive into the human side of things. All right. And this is actually something I can say that at the pro levels is being done more and more and more for the youth parents out there. This is something that is heavily being considered now, the person as much as the player. But when you go into, Wendy, and I got to bring this up, a teenager, you are a different person day to day, with dramatic swings and dramatic changes. I say this all the time on the show. A 16-year-old has the right to their 16-year-old problems. By the way, someone threw that in my face the other day, and they were totally right. And I told them that. They said, like, I have the right to my age problems. I said, that's fine. That's our producer, Caitlin, by the way. She'll appreciate that I mentioned that. But I want to keep going into that with the parents and dive into this with you and Mike and Christy a little bit more, because, we put so much extra pressure on teenagers, and we forget how much pressure we were already under when we were teenagers. And it's not just sport, it's life at that age. It's very confusing. So maybe what are some of the tactics, or what are some of the conversations, or questions might be the right word there, that you dive into with teens to kind of start to uncover that?
Well, with it, you have to try to figure out why they're playing the sport they are. So what's their end point? I think it's communicated the higher level you go in hockey. I'll just use AAA as an example. You're always trying to reach your potential. What's next for you? We want to do this. We want to do that. Once they hit that 14, 15-year-old age, you kind of have to ask them, is that what they actually want to do? Some of them do, and then some of them don't. Like, what's the end goal? And the end goal can change year to year, term to term. And as families move, families change, they do well in school, they don't. There's all kinds of variables that have to be addressed. I like to kind of address these things maybe 4 times a year, definitely more if they need it, less if some kids seem to be more consistent, because they're just so different. And like you said, they're entitled to their teenage self. Right. And I think understanding teenage and adolescent development, adolescent and young adult, would be very helpful for coaches. It would be, you'd be able to look at them with a less judgmental lens. So one thing I see sometimes is this player's much more a character player. This one's silly and does this and that. Well, you can be 3-4 years ahead developmentally, emotionally, socially. We can see the physical development when someone's ahead physically, but you actually can't see the cognitive or the executive functioning, the sort of lag. And it's not even a lag, it's normal, but right. In the system, they measure you off the top. So, here's a player on our team, he's always acts like this. He or she always comes early, stays late, eats well, whatever. So you must not have as much potential because you're not doing that yet, and you're like 16. Well, that person might be intellectually or emotionally and socially a 13-year-old, and that 16-year-old might actually be 18, 19 years old in mature decision making. So it's really unfair to kids. I think that's what irritates me the most, is this mass labeling that seems to happen when it's really just a snapshot in time. Like, this is where you are right now, because are these the decisions that you're making? And how do we go to the place that you want to go next? And what is that place? We need to ask them, like, where's that place you want to go? Are these decisions you're making helpful or hurtful? How do we make better decisions? How do you change habits? So there's a whole thing that I go through over time with them to try to sort this out from a lens of understanding and not judgment.
Yeah, I think, so number one, Wendy, you're a great follow on Twitter. I think you find like for somebody like me, I like you find all these articles and answers and you pose questions like for coaches like me. I don't have to go research that. I'm like, oh, okay, here it is. This is exactly what I'm thinking about. It's a great way. So maybe a good way for us too, just going forward with the conversation is maybe you could just define and frame what athleadership is. I mean, I love that term.
Sure.
I love the term of, empowering leaders through sports. And I think, one of the things we talk about on the show all the time is that we don't want our athletes, and we talk specifically, mostly about hockey, and that we don't want our kids defined as hockey players.
No.
Like they're not just like, so like, I see it all the time when you talk about AAA and A and AA, like that the AAA kid is a better person because they're at a higher level. I'm like, it's so foreign to me that it's just something we don't discuss as coaches, because I think we all assume, oh, that kid's the better athlete, he's a better person.
Yeah.
Or he's more committed, or they're more, they have a higher level, a higher degree of love for the sport. And I think what you've done in creating your athleadership blueprint and this and how you frame your athletes and how you're working with them, I would just like to hear more about, what that process is, how student athletes are selected or apply, and then, what are the components that you work with within the athleadership portion of what you do?
Sure, that's a great question. So they apply in 10th grade. So we just had our 10th grade applications and interviews, and it has nothing to do with level of ability. It can be house league to para athletes to AAA to whatever. The athleadership model is literally what you said. It can't be about ability because that's unfair to some kids who love sport just as much or more. They're just not as good. And everyone has a way to contribute to sport. So initially, we start off with just kind of an assessment of, like you said, like your levels, what do you play? How are your grades in school? And what do you like to do with your time? And it's kind of looking through that lens of them as a person, an individual. And then we provide experiences and training for them to become coaches and or officials and sports administrators. So there's something for everyone. That's how we kind of planned it, is that just, you may not want to coach. We have some kids who they all dabble in it, like 100% they have to try. But once they've learned it and tried it a little bit throughout 11th and 12th grade, we don't expect them to go off into coach right away, because some of them, it'll be when they're 35 and their child starts sports and they're like, you know what, I actually can go do this and I'll come back to it. So some of them, it takes a little longer to come back. Others, once they start, they never leave. Like they're all in and they start grade 11 and they never stop coaching. Others, it's they write programs for little hockey teams, and we run little tournaments. And so they really like the sports admin side, doing registration, helping hockey tryouts, summer camps. Like we've got kids running summer camps now all over the place. Like, I don't know if you have PD days in the United States, like where you miss a day of school and the teachers do work in staff meetings and things, but we have those, and
in-service days typically.
In-service days. And so my students get antsy. They're like, well, we have a day off, like the kids are all home, let's run a camp, let's make some money. So we make money and it funds their certifications. So we do events all over the place, team building events for younger teams, and they model and mentor. So you would put like a U18 team or a U16 team with a U9 team, and they do team building events and lead each other in practices and have little fun games together. And they may charge $10 or $15 a session, and then that money goes to the U16 team to actually get certified in something. Certifications cost a little money. So it's not necessarily a program to just force kids to want to participate in sport at a higher level. There are some that do. We've had NHL first rounders in it. We have a D1 kids that come through every year. But likewise, we have house league kids and para athletes and kids that go into the university sport management programs. Like it just goes fast. Like they just spread their wings all over the place. And the philosophy of it all is you must give back to sport. So you went through sport, somebody coached you, somebody ran registration, somebody was a timekeeper and a scorekeeper. So you can't get out of sport without understanding that you have to owe it back. Like you have to return the favor for all those years you benefited from somebody volunteering for you. Now it's time to return the favor, however that suits your specific or individual strengths. And like you said, I take that to heart, Mike, what you said about some of the better players at the higher levels coming in like, well, I'm not as good an athlete as them, so I can't contribute. Yes, you can actually. In fact, it has nothing to do with your ability. So we almost start the first couple of days of saying, raise your hand if you're an athlete. And they look around sheepishly, and like a couple of the higher level kids will raise their hand. And I'm like, no, every single one of you raise your hand. Every single one of you, if you have a body and it moves, you're an athlete. Like you can pick up sport at any time, and it doesn't matter. Like we have plenty of students that have gone through a program that have disabilities with physical limitations, and they still contribute to sport and love sport and participate. So no, you're all an athlete. Everybody raise your hand. Your body moves. So enough with the judging of who gets to contribute more. And we have a saying that if taken out of context, people don't like it. But if they've heard me enough say it, is that you're not special. And I don't mean that in a mean way. Like you're allowed to be special to your parents. But in this environment, you're not special because you're better at sport. We're equal here. We're going to get our needs met the best that we can that suits you as an individual. But you don't get more attention because you're going D1 or you're a house league and you get less. That's not how it works. You all have leadership potential in sport, and we're going to address you all with the same curriculum and the same opportunities. And then where it goes is up to you.
Right.
So I don't know if that, yeah.
What I also love about this, Wendy, is that pairing the older kids with the younger kids, you're now introducing those leadership skills to the younger kids, because now they're seeing kids just a few years older than them in these leadership roles and these mentoring roles. So now they're going to want to be like them. I've seen it so often with our high school kids going into, either in camps as assistant coaches, or going in and reading to kids, with their jerseys on and representing the high school, and going into the elementary schools. The kids look up to them, and then they want to be like them, and they'll hold on to that and remember that as they grow and get into high school and get into their teenage years. They'll remember that, and those building blocks are already being introduced to them, which is a fantastic concept.
Actually, it took me a while to see the fruits of this labor. So we send all of them into elementary schools. That's where our first stepping stone is, because I say you can't learn to coach if you don't understand age groups. So one of the things that I notice in coaching is people will coach 9-year-olds like they're 15-year-olds, or they'll say they don't remember how they were coached as 9 or 10 or 11, but they think they do. So I'm like, you can't coach the same each age group, because they're different, and the way they think about sport is different and changes. So we go to elementary schools, and they're in gym classes, and they help with intramurals and lunchtime activities, and they go into youth sport. Again, the whole point of that is so they understand the difference between 9-year-olds, 12-year-olds, and 14-year-olds. And as you said, I always thought it was, we're helping the 9-year-olds feel better, because of course 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds love 15 and 16-year-olds skating around their practice. They're high-fiving, they're fun, they're full of life, they're teenagers, they're funny, and they love them being around. But what I love the most now that I've done this is the teenagers come back and they're like, they liked me, like I'm good at it. And they feel so proud of themselves, and they're like, oh my gosh, I actually can coach. I'm like, of course you can. What makes you think you couldn't? And they originally, it was like, this is going to really help the kids, like the 9-year-olds, to have a 16-year-old at their practice once a week, or on Monday, twice a month. It's no, like they are so proud of themselves, and that feeling of pride is what makes them go into coaching or officiating or sports admin. So that's been kind of a a kickback that I didn't really expect to happen at first, but it did happen. And kids are constantly telling me, I joined this program because they came to my practice, or I joined this program because I came to your camp and I saw them. So you're exactly right. Like if you don't model it for younger kids, then they're not even going to know it's available or that it's actually fun.
You know, I got to bring this up too. You know, Wendy, you're tapping on like really almost the core value of this show, which is we have to develop better people, not just better hockey players. Right. And it's, I had the privilege to interview Tom Rennie, the CEO of Hockey Canada. And I asked him, we've talked about this on the show a few times. I asked him, you know, what are the 5 things that separate the greatest players from not the greatest players or just NHL players?
Yeah.
And not one of them was a skill-based thing. It was community. It was character. It was passion for the game. And, you know, what I took away from that is skills are important. You don't make it to the top levels without skill. But the type of person you become is even more important on the road there. And there's this massive missing piece in youth sport, not even just hockey, where we kind of just lose focus on that side of it, or we have the approach as parents of like, well, they'll just naturally learn that.
Right.
You know, I talk about mental fitness and physical fitness all the time. We know so much about physical fitness. It's insane. You can tell anybody how to get their body to a certain point. We know all the exercises. We have all the weights. We have all the bands, we have all the things you need to do it. We spend so much time on that. The brain power is just as important. We know this. No one denies this now. Your brain, your mental fitness really needs to be up to par to make it anywhere in life, not just hockey. We don't have the tools. We don't have the weights. We don't have the bands, right? We're just kind of now diving into this, and we're really starting to uncover the mental fitness side of this. But I love that you're building better people, because the truth is this, you know, and we talk about this all the time. I'm never going to tell anyone they can't follow their dream and make it to wherever they want to make it. That's not my role. Like if someone has a dream, they have a right to their dream. But like you said, you're teaching young adults, you know, you have value beyond your skill set. And the fact that you're on a team creates even more value, and you can give that back. It's funny. I fought being a coach for so long. I remember even in college, I had a college coach say, "You're going to be a coach one day." I remember I'm a hockey player. I'm not a coach. I'm not. Yeah. And I've obviously fell into it pretty hardcore for those of you who know me. But the ability to give back, and even at a young age, it's one of those things. I just love that you brought that up. You know, anyone can do. In fact, you want to talk about passion for the game. My passion for the game when I played was massive, but when I was able to start giving back, it quadrupled in size. It makes it a totally different experience. I love that you're cultivating that. Sorry, I should let you talk. It's your time.
No, it's good. I love it. Because you're bringing up things that kind of spark my interest. And you said earlier about identity and love of the sport is, you're right. We don't want to call them hockey players. They're kids who play hockey, or you're a teenager who plays hockey. Right. We just reframe, we reframe a lot of the language that I find has hurt them later. So what happens is you're quite aware that of the limited amount of kids who can play hockey after they're 21 years of age, right, and the limited amount of kids who can get the elusive D1 scholarship or whatever. And I am 100% agreement. You can't tell somebody that they can't have their dream or shoot for the stars. I 100% believe in that as well. But as they transition through those years, calling themselves a hockey player or even I hear it, baller for basketball players, soccer, it doesn't matter. It applies to all the sports. Is I work really hard to say you're an athleter. No matter what, that can never be taken away from you, regardless of if you get a career-ending injury. They're just reasons you can't play sport after 21 at a competitive level. There's always house league. There's always being active for life, of course. But some of them, like, you're ripping their heart out when they can't play anymore or have that label of I'm a hockey player. So this athleter label, to me, it lasts for your life. Like once you've learned the curriculum, you have a few certifications, and you understand you can contribute to sport everywhere, you never lose that identity. And they really like that. Like there's comfort in it, because when they inevitably they'll move away from sport at some point. So it's less about I didn't make it or I quit. I hear that all the time. Like, well, you didn't quit. You redirected your interests. Right. So you redirected your interest to say school or work or career. That doesn't mean you're a quitter. Right. Like that's unfair. I find the language has to change. and how they perceive themselves.
You're bringing up an amazing point. I'll share some of my own experience with you and how I learned this kind of the hard way. Like, and I hope that this experience for anybody listening can help. So when I was about 25 years old, I was a college head coach. I was working at the National Hockey League in Manhattan, right? This was my life. And of course, at that time, I'm like, I am hockey. I remember thinking that way, like I'm doing this. And by no fault of my own, within 1 month, everything was gone. All of it went away, right? Was not the coach of the team anymore. Was not at the NHL, right? And I was devastated. I was devastated by this. And I remember I am so thankful that happened to me for so many reasons. And this is the lesson I learned, was that I, for so long, identified of, I have to be hockey to be happy. I'm a hockey person if I'm not. And when that all fell apart, and obviously I'm still very involved in the game, I remember the first time I had the thought of, man, I could apply my work ethic and passion and things to other things, my other interests. And I started to do that. And I started to write and broadcasting and all these other things, right? Eventually being a father, being a husband, right? Not in that order, reverse it. But my point is that I learned I could apply like that it wasn't hockey that was defining me, right? It was my work ethic, my teamwork, my people around me. That's what I should have been identifying through, right? Was not the game. And I love the game. I want to reiterate that for everybody listening. Yep. But it was dangerous. I was in a dangerous spot where I felt I couldn't be happy if I wasn't doing the game. Completely wrong, right? So, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this too. But like my message to parents is always, look, love for the game is so important, and the game is important. But the creativity they show in the game, the passion they show in the game, you can apply that to other things. All right. Like my son loves video games. He loves to write, believe it or not. He's only 7 years old. It's kind of funny. But like I tell him, I love that you're creative. I love that you can put effort into these different things. That's the message I'm telling him. He's 8. All right. I'm not telling him like, hey, the NHL, man, if you want to make it, I don't do that. Right?
I think Wendy, to that point, like she what she's doing, if you follow kind of her philosophy and her experiences and the research she does for all of us, right, is that, you're talking about 25. She's talking about sophomores, 10, grade 10. And one of the things, Wendy, do you talk about that I'd love to hear more about in kind of relation to all this, what Lee's saying, like at 25, he gets to make an adult decision. Like he's making thoughts as an adult.
I think you are,
right?
Yes.
And even a teenager, a 10th grader, 11th grader, you hopefully you have more of the tools to react to different changes in your environment. And I think one of the things that you brought up early on is the discussion of like captaincy, and like we're giving like 8-year-olds like the role of captain or under or 13 and under. And I think this goes to this conversation. We're doing all these things and we're not equipping the kids to understand what they mean. And I think maybe you can speak about like what you do with your student athletes, because that really is where athleadership starts resonating lower and lower and lower, right, in the rungs. Because do we expect a 10-year-old to know what a leader is? Because a 10-year-old leader, if I ask my 10-year-old, is, oh, he scores the most goals. That's our best player.
Absolutely,
he's our leader. So, and then the coach goes, oh, he's the best player on the team. He's our leader. Like, yeah, but this person doesn't know how to lead. This person doesn't know how to speak to a room. Like now, there are, in any walk of life, there are those exceptions, right? There are some kids that stand up and they do the Herb Brooks speech and they know it by heart. But for the most part, like, what are some of the things that you found in this journey you're on to see when those players become those athletes? And then what were the tools they were given to give them the opportunity to succeed at that?
Right. And I want to jump in. And also, what can parents do early on to help develop those important traits and characteristics that they're going to need to cope with, as you say, when things fall apart or they've got to readjust, they got to adjust the sails. So what can parents do early on for their kids to help reinforce that?
Well, I look at sport different under the age of 12 versus after the age of 12. And it's also kind of that going into high school versus like elementary and middle school ages. And so there's a lot of questions that you all just tapped on. So I'll try to circle back to all of them.
We're very curious here, Wendy. We're very curious. And we have to draw it all out. Yeah.
No, and it's great. So the coaching theory that we do is very multi-sport. So I always say to the kids, you don't know if you're going to coach your cousin or your brother's kids, or you may have two daughters and they love soccer, but you're a hockey player. The whole point is we do coaching theory, understanding children, and you can apply your leadership skills wherever they're going to come out in the future, because you really don't know. You're not necessarily just going to coach hockey or even coach hockey. You have no idea where your future path may take you. So if you want to apply it to hockey, of course you can. We definitely do that as well. But everybody learns the basic coaching theory first. And in regards to how do you behave as a captain, under 12 years old, I think kids should be rotated through these positions. And what happens is you might have something really simple for them. You're first here today and you're the last one to leave. You make sure that the dressing room looks perfectly nicer than you found it. And so that you don't leave a mess for anybody who works here to have to pick up after you. You just keep a little list of this is what you're going to do today. Make sure water bottles are filled, doors are closed on benches between periods, things like that, or like just little minor things because they're young. And then as they age, we have curriculum written for how do you behave as a captain, as a teenager on a team. And these are the things we write about in class. So this is where we go off into evidence-based work. So we will take university papers, we'll follow papers from professors on these topics. These papers get selected, the kids will write themselves, they write it, and I edit it. So we have all kinds of resources that the kids have written based on evidence that I edit with them and that we will share with teams. So we do give them the tools so that they can actually apply some of these concepts. We don't just wing it, because I'll ask kids on really high performing teams. Like I don't want to implicate anybody, and I'll say, well, how have they taught you how to be a captain? Well, we just know what the older guys did. I'm like, so no one, like just whatever they modeled and you just kind of wing it. There's nothing, no guidelines, etc. And they're like, well, no. And that just gives me fuel to write content. So I've had to immerse myself in in sports. So I've been at this 23 years, but 18, the last 18 in with ninth grade and up, and writing these programs probably the last 13. So I ask kids, like, do you do this? And what do you do here? And what do you do there? And this is how we write programs and curriculum together. So it's also environmental. So obviously I'm getting feedback from where we live in this hotbed of sport where we are. So it would be a little bit different in each environment, from Syracuse to New York to Florida. It would be different a little bit. So there has to be some tweaking of the content, but the message and philosophies usually carry over to many different areas. Yeah, sorry, I think I touched on.
Yeah.
You know, I'll tap on Christy's question about parents here a little bit too.
Right.
So Wendy, I'm going to tell you what we did on my son's 8U team, and you can give us your feedback. You know, one of the things I try and do, I do a kind of a team building off ice with the 8-year-olds every week.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it under the idea of, I think 8-year-olds can understand some of these concepts and we don't give them enough credit. So we decided recently that we're going to pass the seat around the room, you know, a different captain each week. So what we did is we didn't just introduce it and put it on their jersey. We sat them down, the head coach and I, we talked about what does leadership mean? And we listened to their thoughts. And we introduced words like accountability. And it's funny because some of the parents, not on our team, but parents I talked to, well, they're not going to know what that means. Yeah, because no one's taught it to them. I don't need them to be able to say the word. You can express what accountability is. So what we did was we had this great talk with the team and we gave the captain roles each week. So the captain has to go over the practice with the coach ahead of the practice. The captain has the opportunity to talk to the team prior to the game. They do all the 1, 2, 3 chants, right? And we made it very clear, you need to take care of your teammates and of yourself for this week, right? So basically everything other than skill, right? Yeah. And they totally got it. They totally understood it. Our first captain did a great job. Her name is Riley. She's awesome. She's kind of a leader already, but like they're not too young to understand this. And I don't understand why we feel the need to wait to teach really under 18-year-olds any of this stuff. Like, oh, real life will teach it to them. We have why would you wait for that? Like, you can teach them how to be good people now. right? And make no mistake, I actually wrote this down. We need leaders right now. It's funny. And I'm talking like the last 10, 15 years in this country, at least. Wendy, I can't speak for Canada, but like, we just need leaders right now. And everyone's looking around. And I said, the leaders are in elementary school, middle school, and high school. The people that are really going to make change are in school. And what do we tell them? You're not old enough to understand. We understand. Adults ruin everything. We all know that. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So why are we not cultivating leaders?
And Lee, how hard was that to do? Wasn't that, Coach, a lot of coaches don't even want to bother with that.
Right.
You know, how much time did that take? How much effort?
25
was it really
minutes
that taxing?
max. Yeah, it took 25 minutes. Look, the hardest part of 8U, and we all know this, is just every kid has ADD beyond belief, right? but I expect that. And you know what? I tell them that too, Christy. I say, look, it's hard for you at your age to pay attention. I want to try and work on that. You have a right to that. And I say it over and over again. I think I said in another episode here, Wendy, this will make you laugh, but I said that it took me a long time to realize I've always coached high level, top level hockey. So it took me a few weeks to realize, man, you got to tell an 8-year-old something about 10 times before they might even get it to click a little bit. So even I had to learn to be more patient, right? So they're teaching me as much as I'm teaching them. And like, that's really coaching in a nutshell. But yeah, Christy, it took 20, 25 minutes. It wasn't hard. It was just took time. That was it.
Right.
You know, and they got it. They totally got it.
Yeah.
They get better than adults.
I like the idea of using it as your team building. So often in team building, we're like, oh, we're going rock climbing, or we're going bowling, or we're doing this, or we're doing that, which is lovely. Like, that's fine as well. But I think, why not have kind of directed team building? So I believe you have to work it into the calendar. You can't wing it. I think it should be planned, and it doesn't have to be long. We know they have attention spans of goldfish, and they're in and out quick, but little snippets.
Right.
And I find that it's just better if you structure it in there. Otherwise, it just gets procrastinated. Oh, we're too busy this week. We have a tournament. Oh no, this week too many kids are sick, and we should redo it
Wendy,
next week.
like, again, I want to bring up the point you just made, because it does happen. We procrastinate the team building. And I'd make the argument, at least from my profession, it's like, this is worth so much more. Yeah. It's like we're procrastinating the most important thing from my point of view. Again, it's not everybody's point of view.
And I wouldn't schedule it an additional day, because I've seen that not work. They're tired. It's a long way to the rink. Some people have ridiculous commutes. So it's an add-on to when you're already there.
That's what we do.
That's why short and sweet, just add it on somewhere before or after. And Christy, I want to comment on your parenting. Like, how do we help the parents? And to be perfectly honest, I'm going to tell you, I've been pretty frustrated with parents. And originally,
that not surprise me.
No. So originally, before I wrote this program, probably about, 18 years ago, I was doing sessions for parents, mostly in hockey, information sessions with professor from our local university. And he's like a Team Canada physiotherapist, like he's a professor in university. And we're like, okay, let's bring these two worlds together, and we'll do some presentations to parents. And it really wasn't going as well as it should, because, as you said, I wouldn't say adults ruin everything. I don't want to be as dramatic.
I'll say it. No, I'm just kidding. That was a little harsh on my end, but yeah.
I'll say some of them are not as open to learning as kids are. So they kind of get set in their ways, and they'll say something along the lines of, well, I have an opinion. It's different than yours about that. And I'm like, well, this isn't an opinion. Like, I like this kind of ice cream and you like that kind of ice cream. That's an opinion. Like, this is evidence informed instruction for how do you treat a 9-year-old versus a 14-year-old. Like, what's happening right here? And so there's kind of a gap missing on them understanding, like, no, everything that's put out in coaching curriculum or in any of the curriculum we do is evidence-based. And so I was frustrated with adults. And again, parents are obviously there for their children. So they have, I wouldn't say the benefit of knowing how many children respond versus just their own. So they only have anecdotal evidence of their own child in their own limited window. Whereas when you're sharing curriculum and concepts and best practices, it's from evidence, it's widely used. So of course it can be challenged, but it's parents were a little bit frustrating just for lack of interest in learning more.
Right.
So that's why I started it.
How
I
much
wrote this
better?
for
How much
teens.
better would How much better would the program be if parents were more open, help reinforce those concepts outside of the
Right.
rink in the classrooms? How much better would that be
It
for
would
their
be.
kid?
And many do, so I don't want to paint them all with the same brush. Like many do, like they're just really want to learn and they're great people, but there are some that don't. So my whole reason for writing the program and going after the kids was like, well, the kids are our future, just like you said. These 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds, like they're the ones who are going to make changes, not 42-year-old parent who is aging out of the system because they have a 17-year-old. It's literally, let's start them now, let the ripple effect work. And as they go up, they'll have proper understanding, certification, and they will make the change. They'll be the soldiers everywhere rather than just one adult trying to change a room full of adults.
You know, Wendy, you're making me think here, which I love. This is we all talk about how much we love recording these on Monday mornings because it's just a great start to the week and you're providing that already. You know, I'm breaking this down in my head as you're talking, right? And you said something before about, you know, people are tough to change when they're older and how, you know, they forget what it's like to be young. And what I realized is that, yeah, every kid is different, right? Parents know their kids and they know their own experience, right? That's basically how they come into a situation. Some may be more open, some might not. Depends on the person. Again, we don't judge anybody here. And we joking, Wendy, we joked before the episode how there's a little bit of a language barrier between Canada and the United States sometimes. And they said that was my sarcasm coming through. You are right. Not parents don't ruin everything. But this is what you're making me think about, is that we're talking about finding leaders, right?
Yeah.
You really have a 10-year window from 8 to 18 to give them the tools. I think the mistake a lot of parents or a lot of older, you know, above 18-year-olds make is, well, when they get to the point, they'll learn. Why are we not preparing them for that 10 years so that when they get to the hard times, right, or they get to the adversity, it's not always hard, they're more prepared to take it on. That's how you create a leader, right? Is you give them the tools, you let them face the adversity, and then when it becomes time to become a leader, you know, they have more experience. To me, that's the ultimate way to give back. We've talked about this on the show before. I hated growing up, I understand it now, but I hated when a coach would say, let me tell you how hard real life is. Let me tell you how hard my day was. Here's the deal. With complete respect to that coach and that adult, I'm sure your day was hard. I'm not taking anything away from that. The 12-year-old doesn't care.
No.
The 20-year-old doesn't care because they're not there, right? So I'll pose this question to you. Instead of saying to a kid, let me tell you how hard my day was. Let me tell you all the things that life's going to throw at you, right? Because there is valuable lessons there. How do we transform that to something that we can teach children in a way that they're going to understand?
So this is where I believe there's a difference between education and application. So it's the same with adults. We do coach curriculum, of course, but until you actually coach, like you have no idea how to bring the theory to life. Like you just don't. So we do ethics training. So they do ethics certifications. There's one we do from the Canadian Center for Ethics in Sport. It's called Make the Call. And then I give them case studies of ethical dilemmas and we go through decision-making model. Is this an ethical decision, a moral? Is it legal? We go through that. So then it's like when they're going out in the sport community and they do have an ethical dilemma to deal with at some point, they'll have a better lens on how to apply what they've learned. You can't just cram curriculum down like and expect them to be able to apply it. That's why I think when you target parents for learning, it's harder because they have no opportunity to apply it. It's only their children. So these kids will do emotional and social intelligence training and what that even means. And we have rubrics and assessments. They have to assess themselves. Like, do you wait your turn or do you interrupt people in conversations? Do you reflect back questions or conversation pieces? And then they have to go off into places and assess themselves after. So there has to be curriculum. There has to be an application of it. And then there has to be reflection. Otherwise, there isn't proof of learning. Like you said, they're going to learn it the hard way and learn it by experiencing getting cut off a team or deselected. Of course they are. At some point, this is going to happen, or getting sat in sport. But just to tell them that's what you do, it's going to come, you're going to get it. That doesn't make them experience it. So we go through, this is what will happen. These are some certifications behind it based on evidence. And then let's figure out some tools, how we're going to manage this when it actually happens.
Right.
Because they don't have simply saying, oh, I'm going to get sat this year or not played so much. And then you just say, suck it up. Like that doesn't work. It works for the odd one, but that's not really what you're supposed to tell them, how to get through situations like that.
You know, what's funny too is you're making me think about what I do when I work with a team, right? One of the things I go over in the beginning of the season, not middle, before the season even starts, I say, what do we do if we hit a winning streak or a losing streak?
Yeah.
I do that before the season starts, so they're mentally prepared for it when it happens, right?
Yeah.
And typically it doesn't happen too often once you do that, because they know the questions to ask themselves. They know the things they need to rely on. And they know how to move through something like that, and they expect it. Right. So that's from a team aspect. From an individual aspect, you're so right about everyone's motivated a different way. Coaches don't take enough time to find out how each individual athlete is motivated on their team. And when coaches tell me I don't have the time,
Yeah.
I kind of say, well, what are you coaching for? Right. Because that's part of it. Listen, for those of you watching, Mike Benelli put his finger up, which means he wants to talk. And I love throwing to Mike because he doesn't do that too often. So Mike, I'm just going to stop talking and throw it to you right away.
Oh, because Wendy has those answers. She already has this built. She has this, you know, her Google forms built. Like, so Wendy, how do you use that? Like, how do you communicate? Well, there's two things. How do you communicate how do you extract that information out of your student athletes? And then are the parents involved at all in that? Like, do the parents see the answers their kids are giving? Or the kids, so the kids are, this is you to them.
Yeah.
And it's like, listen, just this is your opportunity to, I mean, because we're all in a stressful time right now, right? The holidays, the kids have final exams, or they're coming home, they're whatever, they're just
Omicron, Delta, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Well, and the real stress, right? Forget about COVID and Omicron. It's like, oh, there's no hockey for 2 weeks. Oh my God, my coach is gonna get on me that I didn't work out, or I didn't eat right, or I had too many Christmas cookies, or you know. And then am I gonna try to get 4 hours of training in to make up for 2 weeks of not skating? Like, what are some of the strategies you're using with your athletes right now? And then how really tell us all how you're extracting that information.
Okay, so first thing I want to say is I don't want to come off as a person who doesn't support coaches, because one thing we learn and Christy, this is back to you with the parenting, is we really try hard to change our language. So it's when we talk about a coach that might not be, like, let's say they lose a game or two when they shouldn't have, and then that coach with the 10-year-old team decides going to skate them with no pucks for 40 minutes next practice. I'll hear that sort of stuff every day. Like, the things I hear from students is like a great amount of things that I don't agree with often. And so my response to that is not to judge the coach. I said, people are doing the best that they can with the knowledge they have at the time. So we're not going to judge anybody. We're going to learn from this. So how do we learn from this? So that maybe when you're a coach someday, that you may make different decisions. I'm not a person who wants to just speak poorly about other people that are trying their best. So that's the first piece. And then your second piece is, how do I keep track of this? It's very different, like I said, once they get into high school, because when they get into high school, unfortunately, it's quick. Like 4 years is quick. Elementary and middle school, you got from 4-year-olds to 12-year-olds. It takes really long time. You're in 4th grade. Oh, look, now you're in 5th. Oh, look, like it takes long. High school is quick. We know that they're in and out in 4 years. So I have to deal with those students more often than I deal with the parents. So the Google Forms is so fast. Like, once I make one and then have the questions in there, and they get it. It's a link. They can do it on their phone in like 7 minutes. And then I instantly get the results, and it makes graphs and it shows everything. And I am not tech savvy. I promise I'm not. And it's so easy to do. And I have different forms. So I'll use a template of like your typical monthly check-in or 2-week check-in. And that one I don't really change too much. And then there's other ones like right now, because it's the break for the holiday break. And some of them will report really high fatigue the last 2 weeks, or a lot of stress for going home. Like, it isn't always easy for some kids to be home for 2 weeks. Like, other kids love it. And other kids, like, being home for 2 weeks is extremely stressful for them. So I'm like, oh, okay. And then you really need to use those forms. It's just a way to kind of look for issues too. So I always tell them it's private unless there's something important that I see in mental health that I need to report to your parents or the school or your sports team or what's next. That is not private under any circumstances. Will I keep that kind of confidence? And most of the time it's just check-ins on day-to-day things to see how they're doing. And you do see trends. You definitely do see trends. And you can put in the Google form their email, and they'll if they enter their email, then you can clearly see who responded. But if you don't put any sort of way for them to indicate like their jersey number or whatever it is, like it can be their jersey number, and it's just open, then I don't know who said what. And they're always asking, who's going to see this? Who's going to read it? And so I'll put it at the top. This is just for me to learn more. Nobody will know who said what because you're not inputting any sort of jersey number or email. So I don't know who said what. And then I actually show them on my computer. I'll say, look, here's the answers. Like I literally have no idea who said that. Because often they're not honest because they're worried their coach is going to see it and then sit them or whatever the case. So that I think you need to be honest with them. They're way smarter than we think. So, and I mean that in a genuine way. So they want to help themselves too. So there's little predictors. I'll say, would you like a separate appointment to discuss your hockey or your academic or your life situation? And then kids will put yes, no, maybe, things like this. And often that maybe is interesting, right? So they're not all in for the yes, and they're definitely not, no, I'm good. It's the maybes are, and then I look for different trends. And again, that's also because that's part of my regular job. So I've been trained more than an average, obviously more than an average coach or parent, but those Google Forms are very, very easy to use and share.
I think the key word here is it's easy to do, and that goes to the broader lexicon of sport here is that, like I said before, with mental fitness, it's not as hard as we think it is. There's just a stigma surrounding it. Right. For whatever reason. And that stigma is getting broken more and more each day. Like I think we're going the right direction with this stuff finally. But we talk about it, Wendy, it's not hard just to ask, or like you said, have a form or to listen. That's another thing is we don't listen to kids enough. And often we say, oh, it's just going to be gibberish. Well, that's not always true. It's not always true. They have something to say and we want to enable them to have that voice, right? It might not be correct, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't listen to them. Like we said it before, 12-year-old has a right to their 12-year-old problems. They might be ridiculous to a 39-year-old person, right? Yeah. But it's not ridiculous to the 12-year-old. And you said the fear of a coach benching a kid based on their answers, that means trust doesn't exist on that team, but at least to a certain level where the player doesn't feel comfortable enough. So I love that you do that. I love that there's even just an environment where kids can get that off their shoulders. I also want to point out something you said. We actually talked about this on an episode last week. This goes back to what I said about, knowing your own experience, but not other people's. Home can be hell for some kids. Hell. All right. And I had a great family environment growing up. I always felt safe at home. That is not reality for a lot of people. Home can be very scary, very stressful, a horrible place. In fact, school and hockey is their escape. Yeah, I remember my father brought up to me one time, he's like, can you imagine going to hockey or going to school and having a rough time and going home and that being a rough time? It's just rough all the time. That is reality for probably more kids than we want to think. Right. So this is where, as you said, coaches and mentors, parents, they play into this equation massively. It does take a village. That is a totally true statement. Anyway, I'm just talking, right? I did write one note here. I wanted to bring up from something we've talked about labels before. And again, what I'm about to say, I always got to preface this. I don't mean this to sound judgmental. I'm wondering if this is a truth. I wrote labels for this for coaches and parents. Labels make things more easy for you and justify your own insecurities, right? Again, not saying that in a judgmental way, but when we label anybody, this could be generation. You see this, oh, those millennials, oh, those Gen Xers.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I can't stand that. You do that to justify your own insecurities. Right. And the thing is, I love that Ted Lasso quote. I use it every week. Be curious, not judgmental. right? It's from the show, right? So when I see a generation behind me doing something I don't understand, I want to know more about it. Like, I'm so confused with some of these celebrities today and how these young people get famous. Yeah, of course, as an older person at this point, I'm like, that's ridiculous. Why is that kid famous for singing off key? But the kids love that person. So I'm curious, why is that cool? Right. I just think that, like, when we go, well, that's stupid because when I was a kid, that's not the way it was done. We didn't have YouTube. I was blah, blah, blah. You know, like what am I diving into that? Right. Labels make things easier for you and justify your own securities. I wrote that down. I don't know if it's true or not. Philosophizing.
Yeah, I think that people will assign labels to kids just because it may be comforting. And it's like, this kid has this potential, this shows this. But for me, I like to focus on it like it's a snapshot in time. So I think it's very freeing when they start our program is today's day one. So whatever happened last week, if you were doing things last week that may have labeled you a handful, you don't have to do that anymore. You have a fresh start. Like, this is your first day towards becoming an athlete. And what does that mean to you? So we do a personal creed they have to write for themselves. So we do a lot of studying books in the industry because they like books better than textbooks. Let's be honest, they're teenagers. So
who doesn't?
We'll study books like You Win in the Locker Room First, Legacy, Mind Gym, like the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Like, we have like 30 books that we kind of rotate and have summary sheets for and all kinds of things. And then Atomic Habits is this new one that we've been working on. And then I'll say, learning all of this, like, what's your personal creed moving forward? Like, what are your words you want to live by? Not what your coach told you to live by, not what your parents did, not what this random teacher told you. What do you want to live by? And let's make these words and put them down on paper so that when if you ever start to do something that doesn't reflect those words, that you need to call yourself out. It shouldn't be my U16 coach called me out. It shouldn't be my math teacher called me out, or always my parents, because you're supposed to leave all of those people at some point. And some of you are leaving all of those environments at 18. Right. So who's responsible for calling you out for how you want to be as moving into an adult? So I think that's really freeing for them. Like, well, and then even in 11th grade or 12th, guess what? You're going to mess up again. Because you know what people do? They mess up. And you know what? I say to them, everyone screws up. It's just when and how bad and if you got caught. So don't be all smitten like, oh, she's in trouble, but I didn't get in trouble. That's because you perhaps weren't caught yet, or it's not your time to get in trouble yet. Maybe yours will be as a freshman in university or college. So let's not be judging. Let's just be constantly trying to live towards our personal creed. Let's continue to learn these values and integrity pieces from various certifications and all kinds of courses and life experience from a way less judgmental lens. Like, stop pointing fingers at each other all the time and realize that we're humans and we're going to make mistakes. And we need to figure out ways to accept them, help remedy the situation, and however that happens, whatever their error in judgment was. And then how do we move forward? Because people should be able to move forward from mistakes and regular things they're going through in life.
Right. And even important when they enter the workforce. I see a lot of kids now just not able to deal with a work environment and getting labeled and then accepting that, and they're not getting the promotions and they're not trying to, because all of a sudden they're labeled. Well, if they had that skill set and they say, well, what is it about me? I can change that. Tomorrow's a new day. I'm going to go ahead and go for what I want, for my goals. Such an important life skill to have. So thank you for that.
And we have so many kids, like I said, it's been 12 years now. So I've seen a cycle go through and how they went through their 20s and where they've contributed to sport or society or wherever they're contributing. We have a huge network, like a communication channel, because I think a lot of people will label kids and then they don't know where they went. So you're going to label some U17 player and then you never know where they went. So you don't actually know if your label applied properly. Like, they could be doing incredible, amazing things and they're 27, but how would you know? So
Right.
we keep track of them all. So I have over 450 of them that I kind of know where they all went off. So I have fuel for my data to say to
I love it.
a student who's 17 and misbehaving, because often we have some misbehaving in high school years. And I'll say, well, this person in particular was very similar to you at this age, and look what this person does now. And they come, sometimes they'll zoom into a class. Like I had one last Monday. He's a university assistant hockey coach. He's 26. He needed in Canada and Ontario, you can do an extra year of high school. We call it a victory lap for late blooming kids who aren't quite there yet. And he's like, listen, I needed my victory lap, and I needed my 6 years to get my 4-year degree. And now he's a university hockey assistant coach. He's a teacher. He's done all these things. So he just zipped in, zoomed in my class for 30 minutes, told his story, and kids are hanging off their seat because they're like, well, this person clearly is explaining to us. He was in our shoes 10 years ago, and look at him now. And he just took longer to get there. And it's again, if you don't know where certain kids can be and you can't share that information back, it seems like we only celebrate, oh, well, this player was here when he was 16 and he was amazing and he trained this and now he plays for Boston College and now he's this and that. Well, that's not everyday kids. So we're with 99% of the kids. They're not that outlier. That's, you know what I mean? I guess I don't even know an American player to use that's going to go over well, but that had that perfect pathway. I call it the golden pathway. Don't model yourself after the golden pathway, kids. Right. How about we model ourselves after the 99% of the rest of us who have amazing contributions and potential in sport, and however that's going to play out, we just take our time and let it play out. But so many measure themselves against the outlier. The Tiger Woods of the world, I guess, or one of the Serena Williams or something. So they think it has to be that way, and that's not the way it has to be.
There's no sacred timeline.
No,
I can tell you the most common one of these, and then we'll let you go, Wendy. I know we're keeping you on. The most common one of these is, well, you have to go to college after school.
Yeah.
You have to do that to be successful. And you don't. It's if you know what you want to study, it's a great option.
Yeah.
Right. If you know that college is the right place for you at that time, it's a good option. But the truth is this, it's very expensive. And we're sending a lot of kids there telling them you need to figure out in the next 4 years what you're going to do the rest of your life. That would be unreasonable at any age, right? So if you know what you want to study, this is a few things. It's a great option. And get this, if you get there, start studying it and hate it, you can change. Yep. That's the key. And not everyone's ready for college at 18. Sometimes they need to be 28. That's okay. We got to break that sacred, this is the path. It's a different path for everyone, which is exactly what you're talking about in hockey, in school, in life. And I just think it's so much more important to, as you're doing, Wendy, is what you do. You give them the tools to try and walk into life on their own volition, their own path. I love that personal accountability statement that you have them build. They write it, they're accountable to it. Yep. And then again, we have to stop fearing change. Like change is a bad thing. We're supposed to change. It's what being human is, right? I heard this person said this great thing of, we all know that adage about you put your hand on the hot stove and you take it off and you never do it again. I don't find that to be true. I find adults put their hand on the stove, their hands burn, and they just look at it like, oh, wow, my hand's burning. I can't move it now because I committed, right? Take your hand off the stove. Don't be stubborn about it, right? So it's the same thing with kids, and even more so because they're so adaptable to change at that age. Don't take that away from our kids, right? So, Wendy, I want to give you a chance. Obviously, the website is athleadership.info. We talked about this ahead of the episode, but let's talk about where people can find you and interact with you and maybe access some of the research you've done, because it is invaluable.
Sure. So I have Twitter, and a little website that we made was athleadership.info. And that just shares a lot of the curriculum that we use and certifications that we use for access for anybody. That website is literally meant for anyone to use, access, share, download, change it, add your logos to it. Because as I said, we don't really seek any sort of like financial gain from sharing that information. Like that's not my day job. That's just a little extra thing. So by all means, anyone can go to that website, use whatever they want. It's all good. And I do have my email on there if people want to connect, because I do some consulting work where somebody will say, like I did for a university up north in Ontario and a college, an athleadership program for them. So wrote it in it, and for that target age, because they want to use it with all their varsity athletes. So if you're playing college sport or university, like they're labeled differently in Canada compared to the US. So all their athletes playing sport at that level, they think they should be certified as coaches before they leave varsity sport. And I completely believe with that too. So what other great market are kids at that level as well? They're very technical and tactical if you're playing university sport. So certify them as well. Definitely Twitter, email, that website for sure.
Yeah, this is someone you're going to want to follow, audience. So again, if you're listening to this show, you're absolutely interested in this stuff anyway. So as Mike Bonelli recommended for this episode, Wendy, you've been a great guest. Make sure you guys follow her. Check out athleadership.info. This is the way of the future. This is how to create better people, not just better players. They do go hand in hand. Christy, Mike, I want to give you a chance. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I hope a lot of coaches are listening, because you gave them a lot of food for thought. Take a moment and think about how you're mentoring these kids, not just about, the coaching aspect, are they doing good power plays, do we have good, strong defense? But are you helping to build better people? Are you labeling your kids? Did you go ahead and pick your team captains and that's it? You let the team captains decide, but look at each and every kid. What am I doing to help develop that kid? Do I see the leadership potential in every kid? It's there. And Wendy helped us see that. So thank you.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I feel bad for a lot of coaches. I know some of you coach, there's a lot on their plate. Like we're expecting more and more and more from coaches. And I think one of the biggest things we teach the kids too, and any adults who are listening, is to ask for help. Like if you really want to improve and learn, having humility is one of the greatest qualities you can have. And we're constantly, even in the position I'm in, as much as I've learned and studied and went to school for this, and I'm still desperate to learn more and humble and trying hard to improve my practice. And I think maybe coaches are spread fairly thin, and maybe this is something an assistant coach could help them with, or an other admin staff, because I think I just want to pile more onto coaches and say, well, now you need to be doing this too, right? Because they're doing a lot. Like there could be a role, and I have tweeted this many times. We have, even in junior hockey or the above levels, we have so many scouts and systems that maybe each team could have a role similar to this, instead of, I don't know how many scouts teams have, but let's say you have 5. Well, maybe you have 4 and then one role like this. It is less on the coach, and we find a way to bring this to hockey in a more appropriate way than just pile it on coaches to have to do as well.
Yeah, I would take that same piece and say, this is the access you have. I mean, it was funny. I was on a call a couple of weeks ago with Daryl Belfry, who's a big fan of yours. And, and Daryl's been on our show, and we were laughing. He goes, there's got to be a resource out there that teaches kids to be better role models. He goes, I know there is. I know there. And then we go, oh yeah, well, Wendy. He goes, oh yeah, that's it. It's right there. It's all there. Take it. Yeah. Like, I think that's what you've done, more as a parent, forget it as an educator and a coach. But as I think this is the kind of piece that any parent in any youth organization can take on. If you're a parent that, like you said, wants to go against the adage of, like, oh, this is how we do talent identification and tryouts. Well, why? I don't know. We've always done it that way. Why wouldn't we just keep doing that? Like, well, do you know that these kids don't develop the same way? Oh, they don't? Like, and I think that's, oh, you mean kids don't benefit from red line, blue line sprints for 25 minutes at the end of practice? I thought they did, because that's what I did. So it must benefit. I turned out to be okay. So I think it's all about, taking the resources you've put into this pile, right? And then a parent or a volunteer or a scout or an administrator. We talk on the show all the time that, everybody doesn't have to become a coach. Everybody doesn't have to become a player. No. Like I think one of our most successful high school recruits that I've had in the last 5 years has gone on to be a video editor at a Division I college. So he feels pretty successful, like he's in the hockey world, right?
Yep.
Loves hockey. So I think that's the same way, like finding ways to even getting these volunteers. And that's one of the aspects that's hard. It costs money. Well, this doesn't cost money. This is free. It takes a lot of time. Well, it's kind of all built for you already. Just take it, and you're going to be at practice anyway. Why don't you just extract the kids for 20 minutes instead? So I think it's all about, how can we, is it a valuable piece? And I think, and the problem is the people on this call probably think it's valuable, right? So it's like, okay, well, who doesn't think it's valuable? And then how do you reach those people? So I think one of the ways to reach is education. I think what Wendy's done through her social media platform is keeps putting educational pieces out there that then you can consume at your own, time. And if you like it, you're like, oh, but just like while you're on this call, I'm like, I really like this. And now I got to find a way to institute it. And is it easy? It's never easy. None of the stuff that we're doing is easy. But is it needed? No doubt about it.
Absolutely agree with everything that you just said. That's exactly what I made it for.
Most people do. Do. So, but no, it's just. But I think it's. But I love it. I mean, I think it's like that. Like I said, I think I know we publish these go out on a different day, but like these Mondays are great. Like Lee alluded to earlier, they spur a whole week of. I did my mid-season regroup with my team from our episode last week with JV, and now I'll build my Athleadership group after this week. So it's great.
Well,
really, thank you for being on.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And you know what? I love to get the message out because I genuinely believe in it. I really do. I think it's for every athlete. Like I said right at the beginning, you can be house league player, a para athlete, like anything. Like I said, we have NHL first rounders that have been through this program and Division I athletes all over. It spans all of it. So it isn't just because I hear the odd thing, well, what if I make millions in hockey? Well, it doesn't matter because you're still going to finish at some point and you're going to need to contribute to society in some way. You're not going to want to golf every single day. Like there's going to be something that you want to do where you get out there and contribute somehow, or you may want to even coach your kids or be involved. And they're all like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Well, and the impact they're making now, like they don't know they're going to be millionaires down the road. Like they're making impact now to those 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds. Like be in the now and make the impact now. If it benefits you later, that's a bonus.
It's true. The other thing too is, I'll say this, amongst super high performers, Arnold Schwarzenegger, we all know who he is. We know he's a great actor. Well, he's an actor. I don't know if people know he's great. I like Arnold Schwarzenegger a lot. Actor, governor of California. Little known fact, man was a millionaire before he became an actor. How? By laying brick in Los Angeles with a group of people from Europe. He created a company before he became an actor and already had $1 million business before he became a movie star. The moral of the story is, if you're good enough to make millions in hockey, you'll be a higher performer in whatever you do. It's not just the hockey. All right. And that's part of the lesson, is that it's not the hockey, as you said, Wendy. The hockey's not what defines you. You have something else, and we have to cultivate that in our children to understand that. And should that cultivate into a professional hockey career, wonderful. That's wonderful, right? All roads lead to adult league. All of them.
That's true.
All right. It doesn't matter if you're Wayne Gretzky or a house league player. They all end up in the same place. So cultivate the life lessons, cultivate the accountability and the understanding of these words. Don't let them have to figure it out on their own. Use your experience to teach them and let them enable themselves to move forward. Wendy, I love athleadership, athleaders. I just love that word. I think that's a great way of looking at it. You've been a great guest. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
All right, so that's going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Check out all the episodes at ourkidsplayhockey.com or head over to wherever you listen to podcasts. They're all there. I want to thank the audience once again for listening. Just been tremendous. But that's going to do it for this episode. We'll see you next week for Christy Casciano Burns and Mike Benelli and Wendy Glover. Move the two together. I'm Lee Elias. Have a great night.